The Galactic Science Commission credits humans with making research accessible to everyone. Part 1. The crystalline halls of Prime sparkled with the light of 3 suns. Scientists from across the galaxy gathered in the grand auditorium, their various forms filling seats designed to accommodate everything from gaseous beings to silicon-based creatures the size of small buildings. This was the Galactic Science Commission's Millennial Symposium, held once every 1,000 cycles to celebrate the greatest achievements in research and discovery. Doctor adjusted her translation collar and stepped up to the podium. The scientist's scales shimmered with pride as she began her presentation on quantum folding theory. Her words flowed in high academic, a language so complex that only specialists in her field could truly understand it. Mathematical formulas danced across the holographic display, each symbol representing concepts that took years of study to comprehend. The audience of distinguished scientists nodded with approval. A few took notes on their personal devices. Most simply watched with the detached interest of experts who had seen thousands of presentations just like this one. When Doctor finished, polite applause rippled through the auditorium. Several researchers approached her afterward, requesting access to her data. "Of course," she said, her translator converting her response to standard galactic. "My institution offers research licenses for only 2 million credits per cycle. The application process takes approximately 6 months, and you'll need verification from your own institution's accreditation board." This was normal. This was how science worked across the galaxy. In another wing of the symposium complex, a young-ish student named or pressed his face against the transparent wall, watching the presentations on a distant monitor. He couldn't afford entry to the actual auditorium. His colony world barely had the resources to send him to university, let alone pay for symposium access. He survived by working in the cafeteria, serving meals to scientists who probably didn't even see him, or dreamed of becoming an astronomer. He spent his nights staring at the stars through an ancient telescope, making observations with equipment that was generations out of date. He had ideas, theories, questions that burned in his mind like small suns, but he couldn't access the research he needed. The articles were locked behind paywalls his entire colony couldn't afford. The data sat in institutional archives that required credentials he would never obtain. He wasn't alone in his frustration. Across the galaxy, millions of beings with brilliant minds found themselves locked out of scientific knowledge because they lacked the right connections, the right credentials, or the right amount of credits. Inside the archives of the archival conclave, elder scientists reviewed requests for data access. His species had been collecting knowledge for over 10,000 cycles. Their libraries contained information on everything from stellar cartography to biological evolution. It was the most comprehensive collection in the galaxy. It was also the most restricted. Another request from a small research station. Their credentials weren't impressive enough. Their institution wasn't prestigious. Their application fee was insufficient. He moved to the next request without a second thought. Knowledge was valuable precisely because it was rare. If everyone could access it, what would be the point of spending centuries collecting it? The hive minds of a thought similarly about their biological research. The creators of Forge World guarded their technological innovations with zealous devotion. Every species, every institution, every research center operated on the same basic principle. Knowledge was property, and property must be protected. On the third day of the symposium, the human delegation arrived. There were only 5 of them, a tiny group compared to the massive entourages that accompanied other species. They wore simple clothes that didn't match any particular style. One of them, a woman with dark hair tied back in a practical bun, carried what appeared to be a primitive tablet computer. Another had a coffee stain on his shirt. The commission registrar looked at them with barely concealed disdain. "You're late," she said, her translator making her irritation clear. "Registration closed 2 days ago." We had some trouble with the transport, the woman with the tablet said, smiling apologetically. I'm Dr. Sarah, this is my team. We were hopping to request a presentation slot. The registrar scrolled through her schedule. Everything is booked. The symposium ends in 2 days. We only need 10 minutes, Doctor said. We have something we think the commission would find interesting. The registrar sighed. Humans had only been members of the commission for 32 cycles. In galactic terms, they were infants. They had contributed little of significance to the scientific community. Their technology was primitive. Their understanding of advanced physics was elementary at best. But protocol required that all member species be given the opportunity to participate. Fine, the registrar said. Final day, last slot. Most delegates will have left by then, but you'll have your 10 minutes. That's perfect, Doctor said, still smiling. Thank you. The human team found cheap accommodations far from the symposium complex. They spent their evenings in a small rented room, preparing their presentation on a laptop that looked ancient compared to the quantum processors most species used. They argued about wording, debated which examples to include, and drank enormous amounts of coffee. Do you think they'll understand? Asked the youngest member of the team. He was a software engineer who had helped develop some of the systems they would be demonstrating. They'll understand, Doctor said. The question is whether they'll accept it. They won't, said Doctor, a biologist who specialized in cross-species medical research. You've seen how they operate. Everything is locked down. Everything is proprietary. We're about to suggest they tear down walls that have stood for thousands of years. Then we'll be very persuasive, Doctor said. On the morning of the final day, fewer than 100 scientists remained in the auditorium. Most had already returned to their home worlds. Those who stayed were either junior researchers hopping to network or individuals with nothing better to do. The prestigious scientists, the influential researchers, the decision-makers had all departed after seeing the presentations that mattered. Doctor and her team didn't seem bothered by the sparse attendance. They set up their simple equipment, ran a quick test of their display, and waited for their turn. When the time came, Doctor walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. She looked out at the scattered audience and smiled. "Thank you for staying," she said in standard galactic. "I promise this will be worth your time." She brought up her first slide. It showed a medical breakthrough in nanotechnology that her team had achieved 6 months earlier. The research allowed for targeted drug delivery at the cellular level with unprecedented precision. It was good work, solid science, but nothing that would revolutionize the galaxy. "This is our research," Doctor said. "It has applications in treating cellular diseases across multiple species types. The technology is scalable and can be adapted for different biological structures." A few scientists in the audience leaned forward with interest. This was genuinely useful work. "Now," Doctor said, her smile growing wider, "I'm going to do something unusual." She pressed a button on her tablet. On the display, a network address appeared. It was a simple string of characters, easily. "Everything about this research is now available at that address," Doctor said. "The complete data, our methodologies, our failed experiments and why they failed, the code we used for our simulations, the raw observations, all of it, free. No licenses, no fees, no institutional affiliation required. Anyone with a data receiver can access it right now." The auditorium fell completely silent. Doctor looked out at the confused faces. "This is called open access," she said, "and it's going to change everything." Part 2. The silence lasted for exactly 5 seconds. Then elder scientist rose from his seat, his ancient frame trembling with what appeared to be shock or rage or possibly both. "This is completely unacceptable," he said, his translator amplifying his voice across the auditorium. "You are violating every protocol the Commission has established. You are undermining the entire foundation of scientific research. This is chaos." Doctor nodded politely. "I understand it seems that way. May I continue?" "No," said flatly. "You may not. This presentation is over. Security should escort you from the premises." But before security could move, another voice rang out. It belonged to an engineer named X, who had been sitting quietly in the back row. "I want to hear what they have to say," X called out. Several other scientists murmured in agreement. The human approach was bizarre, possibly insane, but it was also the most interesting thing that had happened in days of tedious presentations. Looked around the auditorium, calculating. He sat down slowly. "Continue," he said coldly, "but you will answer for this breach of protocol." Doctor's smile never wavered. "Thank you. Now I know what you're all thinking. How will we fund future research without licensing fees? How will we maintain quality control? How will we prevent misuse of our knowledge?" She advanced to her next slide. It showed a timeline of human history for galactic understanding. 500 years ago, humans faced the same questions. Our knowledge was locked in institutions. Only the wealthy could access it. Only the privileged could contribute to it. Our scientific progress was slow because so few people could participate in it. The timeline showed a change, a marked acceleration in human development. Then we changed everything. We started sharing. We created something called the open source movement, where people shared their work freely and improved it together. We built platforms where anyone could access research, regardless of their credentials or wealth. We translated complex ideas into simple language so everyone could understand them. Stepped forward and took over the presentation. His nervousness was obvious, but his voice was steady. "Let me show you what this looks like in practice," he said. He brought up a display showing a platform called. "This is where our physicists share their work before it's even peer-reviewed. Other scientists can read it immediately, offer feedback, catch errors, suggest improvements. The final published version is always better because thousands of eyes have seen it first." He switched to another display. "This is GitHub, where programmers share their code. Anyone can use it. Anyone can improve it. Anyone can build on it. Some of the most important software in human civilization was built this way, by thousands of people working together, most of whom never met." Doctor took over next. "This is PubMed, where medical research is freely accessible. This is where anyone can contribute to a massive encyclopedia of knowledge. This is Creative Commons, a system for sharing creative and intellectual work. These aren't fringe projects. They're fundamental to how human science operates." She paused, letting the information sink in. The result: our scientific advancement increased exponentially. Discoveries that would have taken decades happened in years. Solutions came from unexpected places. A high school student in a poor region could contribute ideas that changed entire fields of study. We stopped asking, "Are you qualified to access this knowledge?" and started asking, "What can you do with this knowledge?" A scientist near the front raised a tentacle. "But what about quality control? What about verification? What about preventing dangerous information from falling into the wrong hands?" Doctor returned to the podium. "Excellent questions. Quality control comes from transparency and peer review, which happens faster and more thoroughly when everyone can see the work. As for dangerous information, we found something counterintuitive. When knowledge is open, it's easier to track and respond to misuse. When it's hidden, dangerous actors work in the shadows. But when everything is visible, the community itself becomes the safeguard." "This is idealistic nonsense," said. "It ignores reality. It ignores the need for institutional oversight." "Does it?" Doctor asked. She pressed another button on her tablet. A flood of data appeared on the display, scrolling too fast to read. "Since we joined the Commission 32 cycles ago, humanity has published 214,000 research papers. Every single one is freely accessible. We've released the complete data for 17,000 major experiments. We've shared the source code for 9,000 scientific programs. All of it is open. All of it is free. And do you know what happened? She stopped the scrolling and zoomed in on specific entries. Species we've never met are using our astronomical data to make their own discoveries. Our medical research has been adapted for biology we don't even understand. Our mathematical models are being applied to problems we didn't know existed. Brought up a map of the galaxy. Bright points of light appeared, scattered across hundreds of systems. These are beings who have accessed human research in the last cycle alone, he said. Most of them aren't affiliated with major institutions. Most of them don't have advanced credentials, but they're doing real science. They're making real contributions, and some of them are making breakthroughs that we never could have achieved alone. One of the lights on the map pulsed brighter, zoomed in on it. This is a colony world called Ish Minor. 3 months ago, someone there combined our publicly available stellar data with some basic analysis tools we shared. They discovered a new type of stellar phenomenon that's changing our understanding of star formation. The discoverer works in a cafeteria. He does astronomy in his spare time with old equipment. Under the old system, he never would have had access to the data he needed. The auditorium was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like thinking. Doctor spoke softly. We're not suggesting you throw away all structure. We're not saying there should be no standards or no verification. We're saying that knowledge should not be a commodity available only to the wealthy and privileged. We're saying that good ideas can come from anywhere and we should let them. She looked directly at, your archives contain 10,000 cycles of accumulated knowledge. Imagine what could happen if researchers across the galaxy could access it. Imagine what connections they might make. Imagine what problems they might solve. Imagine what new questions they might ask. The archives would be chaos, said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Millions of requests, most from unqualified individuals. Or, Doctor said gently, the archives would become what they were always meant to be. Not a fortress guarding treasure, but a library serving civilization. She advanced to her final slide. It was simple, just a few lines of text. We call this the Human Open Access Protocols. It's not complicated. Share your research freely. Document your methods clearly. Use language that non-specialists can understand. Give credit where credit is due. Build on each other's work. That's it. That's the whole system. And who enforces this? Asked the creator's representative. Who ensures compliance? Nobody, Doctor said. And everybody. It's a choice each researcher makes. We can't force anyone to share. We can only demonstrate that sharing works better than hoarding. She looked around the auditorium, making eye contact with as many scientists as she could. For the last 32 cycles, humanity has been quietly doing this with every discovery we've made. We've been posting it all publicly, translated into every major galactic language by volunteer communities. We've been asking for nothing in return except that others consider doing the same. Some species have already started. They've seen the benefits. They've felt the acceleration of discovery that comes from collaboration. You've been doing this the entire time, asked X the engineer. There was wonder in his voice. The entire time, Doctor confirmed. We tried to mention it when we joined the commission, but we were told to follow existing protocols. So we followed our own protocols too. We figured eventually someone would notice. Stood again. This time he didn't look angry, he looked tired. This is a fundamental challenge to everything the commission represents, he said quietly. If we accept this, everything changes. Yes, Doctor said simply, it does. The symposium ended without resolution. The remaining scientists filed out of the auditorium in small groups, talking intensely among themselves. Doctor and her team packed up their simple equipment, unsure if they had changed anything or simply created a controversy that would blow over. That night, something happened that nobody expected. The network address Doctor had shared, the one containing all their research data, received over 10 million access requests. Scientists from across the galaxy, most of whom hadn't attended the symposium but had heard about the presentation through word of mouth, were downloading everything they could find. And they weren't just downloading, they were sharing, they were building, they were starting to open their own research. The cascade had begun. Part 3. 6 cycles passed. The galaxy didn't change overnight, but it changed nonetheless, like water wearing away stone. Or sat in his tiny apartment on Ishminer, surrounded by displays showing star charts he had downloaded from human databases. 3 months ago, he had been a cafeteria worker with a dream. Now his name was known across the Commission. The stellar phenomenon he discovered, using freely available data and open-source analysis tools, had been confirmed by a dozen independent research teams. They called it a war formation, and it was forcing astrophysicists to reconsider fundamental theories about how stars formed. He still worked in the cafeteria. The money was the same, but everything else had changed. Scientists from advanced worlds messaged him regularly, asking questions, sharing ideas, treating him as an equal. His findings had been published in a human-style open journal where anyone could read them. Thousands of students across the galaxy were now studying his work. The breakthrough had happened because he had access. That was all, just access. On Forge World, a creators collective called Unit 473 was experiencing something unusual. For 10,000 cycles, the creators had jealously guarded their technological innovations, licensing them at enormous cost to other species. Their patents were ironclad. Their profits were substantial. Their influence was unmatched. Unit 473 had been working on a new power generation system for 8 cycles, making slow but steady progress. Then, 2 cycles ago, a human engineering team had posted their own research on similar principles. The human design was inferior to what Unit 473 had developed, but it was free. Anyone could use it. Anyone could modify it. Within weeks, a tinkerer had combined the human design with some publicly posted quantum equations. The hybrid design was elegant and efficient in ways Unit 473 hadn't considered. The tinkerer had posted everything openly, asking for feedback and improvement. Unit 473 faced a choice. They could continue working in secret, protecting their innovation, maintaining their competitive advantage, or they could engage with this new collaborative approach. They chose engagement. Unit 473 posted their 8 cycles of research publicly, explaining what they had learned and where they had struggled. Within days, researchers from 17 species were contributing ideas. Within a month, the collaborative design far surpassed anything Unit 473 could have achieved alone. The collective reported their decision to the Creators Council. The response was swift and harsh. Unit 473 was stripped of their patent privileges and ejected from their guild. But they didn't care. They were building something better than patents. They were building the future. In the archives of the archival conclave, elder scientists stood before the Council of Keepers. The ancient beings who governed the archives listened as he presented his proposal with a heavy heart. "The galaxy is changing around us," said. "In the last 6 cycles, over 40 major research institutions have adopted open access principles. Dozens more are considering it. We can resist this change and become irrelevant, or we can lead it." "The archives have existed for 10,000 cycles," one keeper said. "We have protected knowledge when others would have destroyed it. We have maintained standards when others would have abandoned them. Now you suggest we simply give it all away." "Not give away," said. "Share. There is a difference. The knowledge remains ours to curate and verify, but it becomes available to all who seek it." He brought up examples of what had happened in just 6 cycles. A Ish cafeteria worker discovering new stellar phenomena. A tinkerer revolutionizing power generation. A graduate student from an insignificant colony world making breakthroughs in medicine. dozens of small discoveries that added up to a revolution. These beings would never have had access to our archives under the old system, said. They lacked credentials, lacked wealth, lacked institutional backing, but they did not lack intelligence or curiosity or dedication. We them the tools they needed, and in doing so, we the galaxy the contributions they could make. The vote was close, but it passed. The archives would begin a gradual process of opening their collections. It would take years, perhaps decades, to fully transition, but the direction was set. Dr. Sarah learned about the archive's decision while eating lunch in her small office at the university where she taught. She read the announcement twice, then sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "We did it," she said to the empty room. But there was still resistance. Several prestigious institutions maintained their paywalls and proprietary systems, insisting that quality required exclusivity. Some species refused to participate in open access, seeing it as a threat to their cultural traditions. A few prominent scientists argued loudly that humanity was destroying the integrity of galactic science. And yet, slowly but steadily, the open model kept growing. Graduate students who once spent years just gaining access to basic literature could now survey entire fields in months. Young researchers could build on cutting-edge work immediately instead of waiting for it to trickle down through institutional hierarchies. Collaboration happened across previously unbridgeable gaps in wealth, status, and geography. The Galactic Science Commission called an emergency session. It had been only 6 cycles since Doctor's presentation, but the landscape of galactic science had shifted dramatically. The Commission's Director General, a diplomatic named, recognized that the institution faced an existential crisis. "We can continue as we have," told the assembled delegates, "maintaining our traditional structures while the galaxy builds a new scientific community around us. Or we can acknowledge reality and adapt." The debate lasted for 3 days. Species representatives argued passionately on both sides, but the data was undeniable. In 6 cycles, the number of published research papers had increased by 300%. Cross-species collaboration had increased by 800%. The rate of significant scientific breakthroughs had doubled. Most tellingly, young researchers overwhelmingly supported open access. They had grown up with it now. They couldn't imagine going back to a world where knowledge was locked away. The vote was decisive. The Galactic Science Commission officially adopted the Human Open Access Protocols as the new standard. Existing institutions could maintain their traditional structures, but commission funding would now prioritize open research. Commission-sponsored projects would be required to share their findings freely. The announcement ceremony was held on Prime, in the same crystalline auditorium where Doctor had given her presentation 6 cycles earlier. This time, the auditorium was packed. Scientists from across the galaxy attended, either in person or through quantum relays. Doctor, now gray-haired and wearing a jacket that actually matched her pants, stood on the stage surrounded by collaborators from dozens of species. Director General presented her with the Commission's highest honor, the Crystal of Unified Knowledge. Doctor and her team did not invent the concept of sharing knowledge, said in his address. Humans are not unique in their generosity or their wisdom. What they did was refuse to accept that knowledge should be a privilege of the few. They demonstrated, through action rather than argument, that science advances faster when everyone can participate. They showed us that we had built walls where we should have built bridges. Doctor accepted the honor with grace, but her speech deflected the praise. "The real heroes of this story are not on this stage," she said. "They're the Ish students looking at stars through ancient telescopes. They're the tinkerers building devices in their workshops. They're the rebels who their institutions to share their work. They're the archivists who found the courage to open their collections. They're everyone who chose collaboration over competition, sharing over hoarding, progress over prestige." She paused, looking out at the thousands of faces, both present and remote. Humans didn't teach the galaxy anything new. We just reminded everyone of something you already knew. Knowledge grows when it's shared. Discovery belongs to everyone. The rising tide lifts all ships. These aren't human ideas. They're universal truths that got forgotten somewhere along the way. After the ceremony, Doctor found herself in a quiet corridor, finally alone after hours of congratulations and handshakes and tentacle shakes and various other forms of greeting. She sat on a bench and pulled out her ancient tablet, the same one she had carried to that first presentation. "Doctor." She looked up. A young stood before her, scales shimmering with nervousness. "I just posted my first paper to the Open Archives," the said. "I was wondering if you might have time to look at it. I know you're busy, and I understand if you can't, but I would really value your feedback." Doctor smiled and patted the bench beside her. "Show me." The pulled up the paper on her device. It was about quantum field interactions, dense with mathematics but clearly written. Doctor read through it carefully, asking questions, pointing out areas that could be clearer, suggesting additional experiments that might strengthen the conclusions. They sat there for an hour, a famous scientist and an unknown student, talking about research as equals. Nobody interrupted them. Nobody asked for credentials or institutional affiliations. Nobody charged a fee for the interaction. This was how science worked now. Across the galaxy, on 1,000,000 worlds, in 1,000 languages, researchers were having similar conversations. A creator's engineer was collaborating with a human programmer in real time, their work visible to anyone who wished to watch and learn. A group of graduate students from 6 different species was organizing a project to map gravitational anomalies, using pooled data from dozens of sources. An elderly archival conclave scholar was teaching young students how to properly curate and verify information in the new open access world. The walls had fallen not all at once, but piece by piece, brick by brick. There were still those who clung to the old ways, and there probably always would be, but the direction was clear. The future was open. In a cafeteria on Ishminer, Orr finished his shift and headed home to his telescope. He had new data to analyze, downloaded from a collaborative project involving 200 researchers from across the galaxy. Someone had flagged an anomaly in the data and asked for his input specifically. They knew he was good at spotting patterns others missed. He smiled as he walked through the streets of his small colony, looking up at the stars. Those stars belonged to everyone now. The knowledge about them belonged to everyone too. And that changed everything.